I think I'll pass on now to George.
Yes, and thank you so much, Phyllis. That was really insightful information. I'm pretty sure the attendees will appreciate it, and everyone else that will have the chance to see it. There's a few questions. Some came through the Q&A, some came through the chat directly. What else I was going to say is, no, we're just obviously very grateful that you found the time. We know that you're on a very busy schedule. You mentioned that you're traveling tomorrow to Indonesia. So for all of those of you that are attending today, this is a really good opportunity. I'll get you to please open, Phyllis, the Q&A, and then there's 3 questions there. Before you start, Jackson previously asked another question, which is if we are going to be emailing the slides to the attendees and absentees, and the answer to that question is yes for everybody. Not only that, we will also be sending you a recording of the session as well, so you can re-watch it if you want to, again, look at some of the things that Phyllis is saying. So Phyllis, I'll let you read those 3 questions, and then after you submit, after you have answered those ones, there is another 5 that came through the chat as well. So go ahead.
Okay, sure, no problem. Thank you for your questions. If you've got some more, feel free to type any questions while I'm going through these. So Jackson's asked a question about, it's difficult to get long-term internships and how a short-term volunteering employment experience viewed by employers. Well, it's actually quite a number of questions, so I might answer them just in little parts. So the first one, which is, it's difficult to get long-term internships and how are short-term volunteer employment viewed by us? I think, any experience is good experience, Jackson. So it really is about how you share that information with your employers. So even if it is a few hours of volunteering, it gives us an understanding that you are actually actively attaining or trying to gain some experience. So it's not a bad thing. So I would say, if you are able to receive some experience, even a week's experience somewhere is really, really good. And I think it's not going to hurt your career or your CV when you go for a job interview. The next question is, what about group work outside of the classroom, group consulting projects? Can they be viewed as internships? It's usually problem solving and teamwork, but no exposure to internal companies. That's a really good question as well, Jackson. It's probably not viewed as internships, but it is definitely viewed by us as, resulting you doing some development and actually achieving some consulting work for businesses. So even you mentioned here that the project might be for 2 to 4 weeks, and how we would see you, I suppose, as an employer having that particular experience. I think it's really great. What I would be saying is when you do your CVs or when you go for an interview, you highlight what were the achievements that you did out of that consulting project. So what did that company actually gain out of your consulting work or your project that you've done for them? Because I think that will be a really great experience to share and it'll be really valuable for your interviews and for your career. Another question that was asked by Jackson is, when is the right time to ask about salary in an interview? That's a fantastic question because I get that all the time. People say, can I ask that in the first interview? Can I ask that in the second interview? We're quite, lots of businesses these days have an application process. And in the application process, you'll notice they include a salary expectations category. So a lot of the times businesses already know what your salary expectations is. I would be saying that, your first interview is an interview about you selling yourself, you telling them why you're the right person for the role. So I wouldn't think that the first interview would be the right point to ask, about salary, because, it really kind of, at the end of the day, makes the organizations or the businesses feel that all you care about is the salary. So I would definitely think about, if you are shortlisted for the second round of interviews, to ask those questions. Another question Jackson asked is, there are so many jobs that don't tell you about salaries, so you don't know, and you might feel that you're applying for a role, and after the first interview, you know, you might like the job, but you don't know if this salary range is going to be in your expectations. So when they do tell you the salary, you might think to yourself, oh, that was a waste of time, because, you know, I love the job, but it was not in what I wanted. I should have just asked, you know, what the salary was in the beginning. And sometimes, you know, if a business have a telephone interview stage where they do that first before the face-to-face, during the telephone interview, it might be a good opportunity to ask that. And if you feel that you want to ask the question in the right way, I would suggest you ask the businesses, you know, whatever the position it is, can you tell me, you know, what kind of range this role is actually offering? The question of asking range gives, you know, the employer an opportunity to think that you just want to know roughly, you know, what this role is paying. So if you just kind of outright ask, can you tell me what is the salary for this role, versus can you tell me, you know, what is the range for this role that, you know, that business is actually going to be paying, it will actually be the same question, but the way that you've asked it is actually more favorable for an employer. Thank you. I've got another question from Nicole, which is, what sort of questions are asked by the interviewer in terms of business and job role? What would make me look like I haven't done my research well on the company and not prepared? And they listed the job description at the beginning on the job ad. Okay, that's a very good question, Nicole. Thank you for that. So I think one of the things that, you know, as an organisation, we like to know about the candidate is you've done a bit of research. So what that is, looking at what we do. Sometimes we ask in our interview, you know, can you tell us, you know, why did you want to work for our organisation? What is it about our business that attracted you to look for this role? And we'd like to know that you not just want to join us because of the position, but you also want to join us as an organisation because of what we do and also our values and our behaviours. We want to know that you've had a little bit of research about, you know, potentially what are some of our key goals, or what we are aiming to achieve as our strategic plans, maybe. So having a look on the website of an organisation about their values, their behaviours, you know, what any highlights that they've had maybe in the media is really, really important. And that's going to really help you when you answer those questions as well. So now I'll just go into the chat. I think, George, you mentioned there were some more questions. I'm just going to go through this. Please bear with me.
Yes, there is some that I'm sending you through the chat function. Yep.
Perfect. So I've got one here. I think it's asked by Naspinda. Apologies if I don't pronounce her name right. So the question was, how many pages do we need to have in our CV? What is the recommendation? 1, 3, 2? Okay, that's a fantastic question. I think, you know, in your CV, it should be at a max, no more than 3 pages. You know, sometimes I get CVs which is 5 pages, and that is definitely too long. We need to know, you know, have a think about it from an employer perspective. If you're applying for a role and we have 100 candidates who submit their CVs, if 100 candidates submit a CV which is 5 pages, that's 500 pages. We are not going to go through all of those pages to see your skill set, which means you want to set yourself up differently. So this cover letter that I mentioned earlier, you know, is going to set you apart. So a short summary of your key skills that is going to give you a high advantage over other candidates. And, you know, I should be thinking, you know, you can highlight in 3 pages what are some of the employers that you work with, and what are some of the experience, and what are some of your qualifications. And make sure it's relevant, because, I mean, I know this question, it sounds simple, but it's not. Sometimes I see people who put experience from 20 years ago. That is not going to be relevant to an employer who wants to know what you've been doing for the last 5 to 10 years. So making sure that you only add and tailor your CV to the right job is very important. Another question I got is from Sue Ann. How many resumes do employers usually receive in average? This question is very difficult to answer, Sue-Ann, because it depends on the position of what we're advertising. Sometimes we advertise for a very niche or technical role that could be 30 CVs. Other times we may advertise for another role like a senior accountant, and we may receive 200 CVs. So it really depends on, I would suppose, the position that is being advertised. Victor has also a question. If all the information is in LinkedIn, why do companies insist on resumes on a document format? Very good question as well. I think, with the social media and how we're transforming the whole entire industry in recruitment, you would think that maybe employers only looked in LinkedIn, but it's, I suppose, the traditional way at the moment on how we perceive candidate submissions. And also LinkedIn is an open platform for information to all employers. It does not show that you have actually applied and made the effort to actually tailor your resume or your experience for an organization. So to submit a CV or to show, hey, just come and look at my LinkedIn and then you can hire me, doesn't really show that there is a care or an aspiration that you really want to work for that business. So I think, at this moment, I think most of the organizations that I know are still quite insistent on resumes. However, I would do suggest that you put in your LinkedIn profile into your resume, because I do know for us, as well as BSI, we look at both your LinkedIn profile as well as your CV. I've got another question, which is from Mandip. Are internships in Australia meant to be paid, or are they unpaid? That's the question. So internships in Australia can vary. There are internships which are paid, and there are internships which are where the students volunteer to kind of work within the business to gain experience. So it really just depends on what kind of internships that you take on. I've got another question from Ling Yu. Is it true that in China providers only hire Australian graduates that come from GO8 universities? Is that right? I'm not sure I quite understand your question.
GO8 refers to universities, top universities like Sydney Uni, Melbourne University, and if employers in China, I'm assuming this is the question, employers in China only are interested in those kind of graduates, or they don't really mind?
Sorry, yeah, that's fine. But I'm not sure what Ling Yu you mean by China providers. Is that
sorry? I think Ling Yu referred to employers, not providers. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So is Chinese employers only looking for Australian graduates that come from top universities? I hope that's your question, Ling Yu.
I think so. Yes.
Okay. So it's difficult for me to answer that question. I'm not sure what Chinese organizations are looking for. If you're asking the question, I suppose, from our industry and our business in China, our organization, I think, looks for the best fit, for the business, rather than looking at, what just key universities. I think it's important to highlight what universities you work from, or you studied at, but at the end of the day, it's about the experience of where you worked and what experiences you can bring towards that organization. I can tell you that we will receive many, many CVs from top universities of top graduates, and at the end of the day, they are not the candidates that were selected because of their experience.
Wonderful. I think that's all the questions we received also through the chat. What I wanted to do is to again thank you very much for the time that you had taken to give us all this knowledge and insights this morning. I wanted to wrap up the session by also telling you a little bit more about the connection in between the invitation you might have received via Facebook or email to join us this morning. Phil is here today, and what the guys at Grand Oasis do. So I'll start by saying that Grand Oasis is an organization that can help international students that are in need of coaching and internships and so on. I invite you to go to their website, which is goasis.com.au. I'll send it to you by chat. Ourselves, Sofiri, we are like Uber when it comes to international students interested on continuing their studies. So if some of you guys want to pursue a master's degree as an example and are in need of somebody that assists you with that process, be it from not only the application process, but also, you know, the graduate outcomes and expectations, you will have the opportunity to connect with more than 70 education experts that are located all over Australia that can actually coach you as well through the process of applying to a different provider for a different area of study, potentially. This is a service that is completely free of charge, and you're more than welcome to use us. We are going to be creating a username and password for everybody that signed up for today's session, and it's totally up to you if you want to find one of these experts that you can actually meet based on your location. As I mentioned before, we will be recording this session, and we have recorded this session, and we will be sending you guys copies of the slides and copies of the recordings as well. But I just wanted to say one more time, thank you very much for everyone taking the time this morning to meet us, and thank you again, Phyllis, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and wish you all a very happy weekend. Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone. Bye, Phyllis.
Bye.
Bye.